I'm Michael Montgomery from the Culinary School of the Rockies in Boulder, Colorado. And this afternoon, I'm going to show you how to can our local wonderful peaches. It only comes about 2 months out of the year where we have these incredibly good peaches that I wait for all year long. So right now, I sort of have too many peaches on hand. My peaches were getting a little too ripe. So I want to put them through a processing and make them stable for a whole year, so I can enjoy these peaches in the cold months. March comes along and I'm craving a summertime treat. I'll crack open one of my jars of peaches. I want to show you basically how to do this, and I will say first and foremost, make sure you do your own research and make sure you're very specific with following directions. Canning is nothing to be taken lightly. There certainly are some precautions. There are things you need to pay attention to. We are preventing spoilage. The main things that are going to cause our jar of peaches to spoil are things like yeast, bacteria, and mold. So we want to make sure we're handling everything so that yeast, bacteria, and mold doesn't continue to survive and multiply in our food as it's sitting on the shelf. First and foremost, I would say find a good resource. The USDA has a great website, or Colorado State Extension also has a really good website where you can find all the information you need as far as processing times. Depending on what type of processor you're using, they'll give you charts and break it all down for you according to where you live. Here we're challenged living at 5,000 feet plus because water boils at a lower temperature. So water's boiling right around 200 degrees here, and most standard canning is done in a water bath canner, something like this, but water is boiling at 212 degrees. So it's a whole 12 degrees hotter. That makes a huge difference when we're canning. So you need to take that into account. High acid foods are much safer to can than low acid foods. Let me just adjust my syrup here. So taking that into account, you can think about what foods you know are high in acid. Most fruits are high in acid. Peaches are high in acid. So they're safe to can if you're following the time in a water process canner. Tomatoes, they're sort of in between, and the acid level is sometimes unknown. So here, I would say play it safe and do not can tomatoes using this method. If you have a pressure canner, which is actually relying on pressure, steam, you can actually do it. It just requires a great amount of pressure. You can also add a little bit of acid. You can acidify the tomatoes to make them a little more stable or a little more safe to preserve. However, play it safe, do your research, and read, and make sure you're following the exact guidelines according to where you live and according to the product that's being canned. Peaches, I've already prepared these peaches for us. So what I've done is taken lovely ripe peaches, not overripe, but ripe to the smell. So wonderful peaches, I plunge them into some simmering water just until the skin starts to release. When that happens, pull them out of the water, throw them into an ice bath. That's shocking them, it's stopping the cooking process, and then they very easily, you can just peel them. And that's what I've done. I've taken the stone out. These are freestone peaches, so they didn't really cling to the stone, and I kept them in the half form. I want to can these peaches just peach halves. You could do a number of things. You could make, as you can see here, I have all different types of peaches. These are smaller peaches that are in half that have been canned. We've got some open peach preserves that we added a little pectin to. You can make peach chutneys, things like that. I like having my peaches just in half, because then when March comes around, like I said, I can pull these out and do a number of things with them. I can just eat them right out of the can. My peaches are ready to go. What I did do, however, was I tossed them in a little bit of lemon juice. And that's just going to help them from oxidizing or turning brown. When you open a peach, it starts to turn brown. I don't want my canned peaches to be too dark. Toss them in a little bit of lemon juice. And I know the acid level's high enough with peaches, so it's not really for acidity, it's more for just preventing that discoloration that I don't want to see in my peaches. These are all ready to go. I have a light syrup. So I'm going to can my peaches in a little bit of sugar syrup. A light syrup, meaning less sugar to the amount of water. So what I've done here is approximately 1 to 3. 1 cup of white sugar to 3 cups of water. Medium syrups, heavy syrups, the amount of sugar is going to increase depending on what you want your peaches sitting in. I like to use sugar because it helps keep the peaches' shape. It's going to help keep a nice texture. Also helps set their color. And once you open them later on, it's going to prevent them from getting moldy really quickly in your refrigerator. A number of reasons that I like to use sugar. You don't have to use sugar. You could simply use water. You could use honey. You could use a mixture of honey and water. Again, do your research and make sure you're following some guidelines for the syrup that you're using. My syrup is ready and it's hot. My peaches are ready. So this is called a raw pack, meaning I am going to pack my peaches raw into my jar and then cover it with hot syrup. It'll then go into my hot water processor. All of my equipment in front of me has been sanitized, so make sure before you have a very clean area in your kitchen. Make sure that anything the food is going to touch has been sanitized. So I took my mason jar, my lid, even the thread, I put it all in boiling water and let it boil for 10 minutes. Pulled it out and just let it air dry. Don't dry it with a towel, just let it air dry. I even go as far as sanitizing my funnel, just because the syrup, the food, will be in contact with your funnel as well. So keep that in mind. You want to get rid of any unwanted bacteria early in the game. Keep it nice and clean. What I'm going to do first is take my sanitized jar and I'm going to fill it with peaches. You can use your funnel if it helps you. I don't think the peaches are going to fit through the funnel, so I'm just using a pair of clean tongs and I'm going to pack my peaches in my jar. And I like to get as many peaches as I can in the jar, but I need to leave about an inch of space at the top. I need some space for syrup, and then when we fill this with syrup, we actually want to make sure we leave a ½ an inch of head space at the top of the jar. And this is the general rule for anything you're going to put into a jar and can. Leave space. So I've packed about enough peaches in here, leaving about an inch of space. At this point in time, my funnel is handy. I have my hot syrup. Remember, this was a light syrup. Let me move my jar grabber. And I'm going to be careful when you're doing this. Pour this sugar syrup around our peaches, leaving, again, about a ½ an inch of space. So I use that line on the jar itself, and I don't go above it. So I'm right up to that line. I actually can do just a bit more, and I'm making sure I'm not going above it. Again, make sure you're remaining nice and clean. I'm going to save that simple syrup. It'll save in my refrigerator for some other use. Next, I'm going to take my very clean lid, place it over the top. If you've gotten any syrup on the sides, make sure you wipe it. This is nice and clean. And then I'm going to put my screw cap on, and I'm going to tighten this, but I'm not going to go completely overboard. If you notice you have a lot of air bubbles in your peaches, and this is looking pretty good, you can use this little tool and you just go right down the side, and you're going to release any of those air bubbles that have occurred. And that's just, it's not going to hurt anything. It just looks nicer if you don't have air bubbles in your canned products. You just slip it right down between the food and the jar, and it should remove air bubbles for you. So this is tight. I'm not over tightening. I'm going to put this in my handy rack that fits right down inside my canner. My canner is rapidly boiling, which is exactly what we want. And there's a lot of water in here. The reason there's a lot of water in here is I need at least an inch of water above my canned goods. So be careful when you're doing this. I always like to have my water boiling ahead of time. I also have a tea kettle back here just in case I need to top off my water once I put my peaches down into place. Gently rest my jar down into my canner. I'm going to make sure I have about an inch of water, which is looking great. I'm going to watch this because I want to make sure I see it actually coming to a rolling boil before I put the lid on, and that's when the timing begins. And this is where I can't stress the importance enough of using your online guides, or if you have a good solid book, follow the timeline for the processing. So this would be considered a raw pack. I have a quart jar, which makes, if it's a quart or a pint, there's a big difference there as far as the processing time. And we are at 5,000 whatever feet it happens to be. So online, I found on the USDA website, I've got to check my notes, at 3,001 feet to 6,000 feet, I looked up peaches, I looked up a quart, and it's telling me 40 minutes of processing. So once that I see this has come to a rolling boil, I'm going to put my lid on. I'm going to make sure that it's continuing to boil, so keep your heat high and set your timer for 40 minutes. I know it seems a little long, but play it safe. After 40 minutes, I'm going to gently release, I'm going to take the lid off, and I'm going to gently pull out the jar. And this is when this comes in handy, or you could just pull the whole contraption out that I rested down in there. I actually like to do this individually, pulling the jars out. I usually put them on a towel on the counter and let them completely cool down. It could take anywhere from 12 hours, it could take 18 hours, at least overnight. At this point in time, you want to make sure you have a vacuum seal before you automatically put them away or put them up. Make sure you have a seal. So the first thing I'll do to test the seal is press on that lid. Don't even worry about this anymore. These can be taken off. Press on your lid and make sure it is not pinging back up. So I'm pushing on this and there's no sound. It's actually sucked down, which is telling me I have my seal, which is very important. If you hear this, which I can actually hear that, that means it's not been sealed. So don't automatically dispose, don't automatically throw it away. I just put this in my refrigerator and I'll use this quickly. So it's the first jar I'll use because it didn't actually seal for whatever reason. Play it safe, put it in your refrigerator and use it in a week. Don't throw it away. So again, test them all, and if they're completely tight and sealed, this can then go into a cool, dark pantry for a year, up to 18 months, really depending what it is. So come March, I've got my jar of fresh Colorado peaches back from August, and I couldn't be a happier man. Again, I encourage you to look online for resources, or again, use your books just to play it safe with canning to keep you and your family safe.